I want to discuss with you today Lincoln's Reconstruction plans. Lincoln's Reconstruction plans. Lincoln's Reconstruction plans. Okay? Before we get into that, I think we have to. I think it would be useful to say, it would be fair to say, not now, put that away. It would be fair to say that why is it so, I have a question, why is it so difficult to get a handle on Lincoln and race? Why is it so difficult? Help me. I want you to think. Why is it so difficult to deal with Lincoln and race? You haven't been here. You be quiet, okay? Go ahead. Nice and loud.
Because he contradicts himself so many times.
He is full of contradictions. Why is he full of contradictions? You make an excellent point. She makes an excellent point. He is full of contradictions. Why is he full of contradictions? One, go ahead. He knows that it's wrong. It's clear that it's wrong, but we need a but there. But we need a but. Well, but I think it's I don't think we can start with that point. He knows that it's wrong. Go ahead.
He doesn't believe in the equality of blacks and whites.
He knows that slavery's wrong, but he recognizes something. Lincoln is a politician. He's not a philosopher. He's not an abolitionist. Lincoln is a person who has to find out where the society is going. That's what a politician does. Where's it going? Follow me. You get the idea? A politician is a person who has to get elected. A politician has to deal with people as they are. So Lincoln, as a politician, he knows it's wrong, like you said. But he's a politician. And because he's a politician, he knows it's wrong, but he's continually probing into society to see what the sentiments of society are. Do you follow me? And help me. What are the sentiments of society? Yes, you do. What are the sentiments of society in regards to this issue? Yes, young lady. Pardon me? Not exactly. Not exactly. That's right. You missed the other day. What about society? Come on.
Society is very racist.
Society is very racist. Society does not accept the social and economic equality or potential or likelihood that black and white people will have a relationship. That society is not in favor of. Society might be opposed to slavery. White people, many white people may find slavery evil and wicked. But does that mean that they believe in racial harmony? It does not. Do you see the problem? The problem is there's a difference between the institution of slavery and the implications of a society that sees no distinctions regarding race. That's a problem, isn't it? Lincoln appreciates that problem. Lincoln appreciates. This is what you meant when you said, but he didn't know what to do with it, or whatever the last phrase was that you used. Lincoln appreciates the unlikelihood, write this down. Lincoln appreciated the unlikelihood. He appreciated the unlikelihood that race relations in America could what? Help me. Could what? Don't say change. That race relations could ever be predicated on equality. He did not believe. Lincoln did not believe that race relations could ever be predicated upon equality. Write that down. He did not believe that. He couldn't understand that. Lincoln he did not believe that race relations would ever be predicated upon equality. He could not see that. Stop. Can you appreciate that? Can you understand that dilemma? That was a dilemma. Go ahead.
I think I possibly could, thinking that.
Nice and loud.
Or knowing that he grew up in those times. Was born into it.
That's right. And that's what he would say. He would say, my whole life, my whole experience, everything that I see. And don't forget, Lincoln would say, I'm a person who is committed to seeing things and understanding things and getting where people are. That tells me that there will never be a society in which black people and white people can exist on the basis of equality. That's what he thinks. And so, do you see that? Do you see how limiting that is to him? When I say limiting, he realizes that slavery is evil and wicked, and slavery should end. That he realizes. But he doesn't understand how the democratic system in America can function with two races. Because he in effect says, if there are two races that will never be equal, that will mean that there will always be some people who are more equal than other people, and that is not good for America. That conflicted with his image of America. Did you get that? Write that down. Lincoln believed that America could only exist America could only exist if there was one system of justice and one system for all people. America was predicated on a system on which all people would be treated the same way. There was one democratic system. And Lincoln has a hard time taking that idea, that axiomatic idea, and applying it to life. He sees a disconnect. Did you hear what I said? He sees a disconnect. Write that down. He sees a disconnect. There should be one democratic system. But Lincoln sees that with black and white people, there will be separate systems. And that makes him unhappy. That's a disconnect. Is that clear? Stop for a second. Is that clear? Lincoln wants there to be one democratic system. But his mind tells him there can't be one democratic system because black people and white people will never be the same. They'll never be treated the same. He can't see it happening. And he can't see it happening as you suggested. He can't see it happening because his whole life was a life that told him the opposite. That told him that the racism of people the racism of white people would always be there. More on that at another time. Professor, I have a question. If that's so, then why was it so important to get rid of slavery? Go ahead.
Because slavery was undemocratic.
Slavery was inherently undemocratic. Just as she said. Who said that, by the way? We said that the other day. Hofstadter says that. That's why we read. Hofstadter said slavery is inherently undemocratic, and Lincoln believed that. That's one problem. Why is it necessary? more. Why is it necessary to get rid of slavery? Louder.
It's immoral.
All right, he did believe it was immoral. Yes. Why is it necessary to get rid of slavery? Better yet, I got to give you a better question. I didn't give you a good question. I got to give you a better question. How do you get rid of slavery? According to Lincoln. Pardon me? You're not answering me, okay? You're saying something, but it's incoherent. How does Lincoln want to get rid of slavery? Go ahead. He wanted it to kill itself. You follow me? He wanted it to kill itself. He wanted it to choke itself to death. That's what he wanted to do. But he did not want to overtly take on slavery. He did not want to overtly challenge the system. And when you read Stamp, chapter 2, you will see, even during the war, Lincoln is more than willing to compromise and cut a deal and coexist with slavery if his larger goal could be achieved, putting the Union back together. Write that down. Lincoln's larger goal is, of course, to put the Union back together. Okay? Are you there? You breathing? Lincoln's larger goal is to put the Union back together. So I have to begin. I have to kind of reiterate the point I made initially, and that is, Lincoln is very complex in regards to this, isn't he? He's complex because America is very complex. Lincoln's not an abolitionist. Lincoln is not purely a moral person. Lincoln is a politician, a very hungry politician who experienced mostly failure in his life. And that makes it very ironic. Here is a guy who wins 1 2-year term to the United States House of Representatives, loses everything else, a complete loser, almost a total loser, that tall, skinny, total loser, who gets elected president. And many people still inferred that Lincoln was one big loser. Little did they know what Lincoln was all about. Lincoln's a surprise. He's a surprise, as many people are in life, by the way. They're a surprise. Lincoln was clearly that kind of a surprise package. Okay? Questions from you. Your feeling, your observations. I want your feelings, your observations. Think. Think. Everybody's thinking. Help me. Is Lincoln up to this challenge? Well, he's full of melancholy, isn't he? He's often depressed. He's full of melancholia. His wife is absolutely, how can I say this diplomatically? A very fragmented, nuts, all right? A very fragmented person. He loses a child. Lincoln has dreams. When Lincoln dreams, Lincoln's dreams are interesting. He dreams of himself. He dreams of his own death. He dreams of walking into the White House and there's a funeral going on. And in this dream, there's a casket in the middle of the room. And he goes to the casket and he opens the casket, and of course, there is no one to see but himself in the casket. Lincoln is like a biblical character, is he not? It's like a biblical story. Lincoln. Get the idea? Lincoln becomes an enormous, Lincoln grows enormously. By the way, you know that Lincoln was a lawyer, don't you? Have you noticed that all lawyers aren't equal? Have you noticed? You will. But Lincoln's a special kind of lawyer. Lincoln's an appeals court lawyer, meaning that when an attorney screws up a case and somebody is going to be executed or somebody's going to be taking a long trip, you know, when you do a long trip, 25, 30 years in prison, that's when they call in Lincoln. And Lincoln takes the case to appeals court and argues the case based on the Constitution of a particular state. Lincoln is one smart guy. Lincoln is well-versed. Lincoln's got all the skills, all the political skills. Lincoln is a master politician. You know that tall, skinny loser? That tall, skinny loser is a master politician. Write this down. By about 1863, there were several Confederate states that had been taken over by the Union Army. By about 1863, there were several Confederate states that were taken over by the Union Army. Louisiana, Virginia, Arkansas, and one other that I can't remember. Okay? Now, there are several states that were taken over by the Union Army by about 1863. You can look it up, but like I say, Virginia, Arkansas, and Louisiana were at least three. This provided Lincoln an opportunity to experiment, to lay out what we would call a Reconstruction plan. Write that down. This provides Lincoln an opportunity to lay out a Reconstruction plan. By about 1863, Lincoln is able to propose a Reconstruction plan. Okay? I want to interject something for a second. Before I tell you more about Lincoln's Reconstruction plan, I hope you appreciate something. The dilemmas that Lincoln confronts, the dilemmas that we discussed a moment ago, those dilemmas will be ongoing dilemmas. You can see that, can't you? The problems that Lincoln dealt with in regards to race relations would be problems that would continue long after Lincoln had left the scene. That's why to appreciate how Lincoln perceived the problem is really an introduction to what will be ongoing problems well into our own day. Okay? Back to Reconstruction. So by about 1863, Lincoln is able to lay out some particular considerations that he has about how Reconstruction is going to occur. Continue. One point I must mention before I get into the particulars, and that's this. It is very unclear, based on the Constitution, who would have a greater say in reconstituting the nation, the Congress or the President. Write that down. It's unclear whether the President or the Congress would be most instrumental in creating a Reconstruction plan. I stand to be corrected, but offhand, I cannot think, I don't believe this comes up in the Constitution, how you put it back together. Do you follow me? And so as a result, it's unclear which branch of government would be more decisive in creating a Reconstruction plan. It's true the President is the commander-in-chief, but the Congress, write this down, the President is the commander-in-chief and the chief executive in the Constitution, but the Congress has the authority to determine its membership. But the Congress would have the authority, write this down, the Congress would have the authority to determine its membership. So all that I'm saying is it's unclear who would have more authority here. Clearly, Lincoln felt it was his responsibility to put the nation back together. Clearly, Lincoln felt that. Why did he feel that way? Why did Lincoln feel it was his responsibility? Are you listening to me? Why did Lincoln feel it was his responsibility? Because Lincoln was racked by guilt. Write this down. Lincoln was racked by guilt in regards to the Civil War. He felt responsible. He felt responsible for the way it all broke apart. He felt responsible for this war. And he was very determined to not only put the Union back together, but he thought the quicker it could be put back together, the better it would be. Do you get the idea? He felt very responsible. And you can appreciate that, can't you? You don't want to be President of the United States. You want to be the president who's known for breaking up the Union? Nobody wants that. The president wants to be a success story, not a story that is, full of disaster. So Lincoln felt very responsible. Lincoln lays down some very interesting stipulations. Here we go. Stipulation number one. Point number one in regards to putting the Union back together. Point number one. Lincoln says, anybody who wants to take an amnesty oath, anybody who wants to take an amnesty oath to be forgiven, take an oath of amnesty in which one asks for forgiveness, then Lincoln believes that would result, that should occur in the vast majority of cases. The vast majority of Southerners need only ask for amnesty. The vast majority of Southerners need only ask for amnesty. Okay, he believes the vast majority. Who would be excluded from receiving an amnesty oath? High-ranking Confederate officials. Don't write. High-ranking Confederate officials. Individuals who may have committed a war crime. They would be prohibited from receiving amnesty. If you were a Union officer who relinquished your commission and joined the Confederacy, you would not receive amnesty. There'd have to be some special amnesty provided you. The vast majority of people would receive an amnesty oath, could take an amnesty oath. If you ran a prison and treated prisoners cruelly, you would be prosecuted and maybe executed. If you were a high-ranking Confederate official, maybe you may not immediately receive an oath. But if you were a Union Army officer who, in a sense, raised your hand to defend the Constitution of the United States and then joined the other side, there'd be a problem with you. Do you follow me? Are you listening? But the vast majority could receive an amnesty, could receive amnesty. Point number two. Lincoln says that when 1 out of 10, when 1 out of 10 Southerners from a potentially reconstructed state, when 1 out of 10 Southerners from a reconstructed state, write this down, when 1 out of 10 from a potentially reconstructed state have taken such an amnesty oath, 1 out of 10, that would be a sufficient number, that would be a sufficient number of people in order to take the next step forward. But all he demands is 1 out of 10. Congress, continue with this idea, Congress had another idea called the Wade-Davis Bill. Congress had another idea. In 1865, Congress had another idea that they put forward in what was called the Wade-Davis Bill. The Wade-Davis Bill stipulated that at least 50%, write that down, at least 50% of Confederates needed to take an amnesty oath. Lincoln says only 10%. The Wade-Davis Bill of 1865, Wade-Davis, just as it sounds, Wade-Davis Bill of 1865 stipulated that at least 50% would be necessary before a state could go further. Lincoln says 10% will be sufficient. Explain that to me. What is Lincoln thinking? Are you a fox or are you a pussycat? You a fox or you a pussycat? Time not to be a pussycat. Time to be a fox. Time to be critical. Go ahead, young lady. Nice and loud.
That if only 10% of the state they can become individuals.
10% within a state. 10% within a state.
They can govern their own and
But why does he take, why the number 10%? Why is that significant? Yes, you do. Why is that significant? Come on. Why the number? Why is the number significant? My name is, go ahead.
because he wanted a quicker reconstruction.
He wants to make it quicker, more. Young lady?
I was going to say that.
He wants to make it quicker. What else? Will you go up there and shut that door? My friend, go up there and shut that door. My name is Richard Clayman. Don't write. My name is Richard Clayman. I'm from Alabama. I had 5 sons that fought in the war. All 5 were killed. Thank you. All 5 were killed. You want me to say that I'm sorry? You get it? There will be 600,000 casualties, 600,000 dead in the Civil War. Don't write. 600,000 dead. How many people have we lost in Iraq? About 5,000? 5,000 tragic deaths. How many dead did we lose in Vietnam? About 60,000 tragic deaths. How many people were killed during World War II? 300,000. How many casualties in World War I? 115,000. But there were 600,000 dead in the Civil War. Is that a lot of dead? And 1.2 to 1.5 million seriously injured. There is a professor at Harvard who is now the president of Harvard Her name is Drew Faust. And she just has a new book out. It's called, very interesting book. It's called The Republic of Suffering. And what is it about? It's about the 600,000 dead. It's about how death colored the entire period. It's about how people dealt with death, how the families who got the news about death learned of death. It's about how death captures not only the Civil War, but the decades that follow it. Because there were so many deaths. So many, many deaths. Remember me, Richard Clayman? The guy from Alabama with the 5 sons? Remember me. You wanted me to say I'm sorry. It's very hard for me to say things like I'm sorry.